The millionaire is shocked when the black beggar woman he invited arrives like a goddess. The buzz was electric. The grand hall of the city's most prestigious firm had never seen a night like this. Glittering chandeliers cast sharp light on glossy marble floors. The air thick with expensive perfume and murmurs of power. Everyone was there, except no one expected her to arrive. The woman Edward, the senior partner, had mockingly invited as a joke, the black beggar woman. He'd smeared about in a whispered conversation, was about to make an entrance that nobody would forget. A tense silence fell over the crowd the moment the doors swung wide open. There she was, Marcela. Not a shadow on the fringe, not a forgotten face behind the reception desk. She moved through the room like a storm wrapped in silk. Her custom-made dress clung to her with bold defiance, a deep royal blue that caught the light with every step, shimmering like water stirred by moonlight. Her skin glowed, rich and radiant, every inch a celebration of strength and beauty that no designer label could fake. Whispers erupted. "Is that Marcela?" someone gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. "Is she really here?" another voice sneered, low and bitter. But even that held a sharp edge of awe. Marcela's hands trembled only for a second, as the faintest flutter of nerves swept through her chest. Then she straightened, cheeks set, lips pressed into a line that declared this was no act of charity or pity. This was her moment, the moment she took everything they tried to strip away and slammed it back in their faces. She stepped onto the small stage where the crowd's chatter dropped into a heavy hush. Clutching the microphone, she began to speak, her voice calm but fierce, cracking the night with stories that should have been shadows. Tales of her work, teaching immigrant women in the back streets of Brussels. Women whose tongues tangled with foreign words, whose hands shook while holding new hope. Stories of struggle, sleepless nights, and the fierce flame of survival. Slowly, faces that had glazed over with polite boredom snapped to attention. A lump formed in Edward's throat. A man used to commanding rooms, now stripped bare by the raw honesty in the room. His eyes flickered, sharp with something like regret or fear. He wasn't the only one. The air thickened as Marcela's words tangled with the walls and sparked something dangerous, something that could shake the carefully held balance of power here. The crowd was a mix of shock and silent admiration, whispers that slipped out between sips of champagne, eyes avoiding, but never fully escaping, her radiant presence. The story wasn't over, and neither was the party. But beneath the surface of admiration, a thread of tension twisted tighter. A secret long buried in Edward's past was rumored to threaten their fragile new ground. A secret that could ignite the room in ways no one expected. What would happen when the shadows came crawling out? Could their uneasy truce survive? Or was this night the beginning of something that would tear everything apart? The gala glowed, but the darkness wasn't far behind. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. A lot of subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at that red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content coming your way. And while you're here, hit that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact." The crowd hung on Marcela's words, a spellbound audience caught in her rhythm. But just as her voice surged with passion, slicing through the tension, a sudden crash erupted at the back of the hall. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, silencing her and everyone else. All heads turned, captivated by the source of the disruption. A figure stumbled through the doorway, eyes wide and desperate. It was Layla, Marcela's younger sister, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Chills raced through the room like a wave. Layla's breath came in ragged gasps, her words spilling out in a torrent. "Marcela, you need to come with me. It's Mom. She's hurt. They took her." Gasps echoed around the hall, sharp and disbelieving. The whispers that floated through moments ago turned into a thick buzz of confusion and pity. Marcela's heart sank as her world shifted, balance lost in an instant. The light she'd ignited moments before flickered, casting shadows over her resolve. "Layla!" Marcela stepped down from the stage, the microphone falling from her hand, crashing onto the floor as she rushed toward her sister. Panic radiated off her. "What do you mean, they took her?" Layla choked on her fear. "The men, they came to the house. I hid, but they found her. Mom, she tried to protect me, and they—" Her voice broke, the urgency replaced by despair. Edward stood frozen, mouth agape in horror. This was not how the night was meant to unfold. He felt the eyes of the crowd swinging toward him, expectation and judgment swirling like a cyclone. Did he know anything about this? Had he ever cared to ask? The murmurs escalated, a maelstrom of sympathy and discomfort. Marcela's anger flared, visible in the tension of her stance. As she turned to face Edward, "This isn't just some charity event, is it? You didn't just invite me here to gawk." Edward's face paled, the reality of the situation crashing over him. "I didn't know," he began, but the words stuck in his throat as Marcela's eyes blazed with fury. She looked stronger than she ever had, yet so fragile, anchored by her sister's terror. Just then, a man stepped forward from the shadows of the crowd, a grin creeping across his face. "Is the little actress in distress?" His voice dripped with mockery, and the room collectively recoiled. "It's a shame, really, that your mother got caught up in something beyond her control." His casual cruelty ignited a sudden frenzy. Marcela felt a surge of rage. "Who are you?" she demanded, her hands balled into fists. The crowd pressed in, caught between curiosity and fear, the air thick with tension. "I'm just a friend of Edward's," the man shrugged, spinning a coin in his hand. "But let's be real. The street life you pretend to escape, it's always going to be there, won't it? Friends, family, they all end up collateral damage." Shock coursed through the crowd. Murmurs swirled, the truth hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Families pulled their children closer, whispering among themselves, judging those who had crossed the border between privilege and struggle. Marcela's mind raced. How had this night twisted into such darkness? Her sister, her mother, everything she had fought for seemed to hang by a thread ready to snap. "What do you want?" She barely managed to keep her composure, throat tight with anguish. "A little fun. Maybe a game of chance." The man grinned wider, each word dripping with malice. "But like I said, your kind isn't built for it. The stakes are high, and I imagine you'll regret playing." The tension in the room thickened, making it hard to breathe. Marcela's eyes locked onto Edward's, who stood immobilized, his secrets like restless shadows behind him. The night was unraveling, the facade of civility breaking apart. What would happen next? Would she lose everything? Would the dangerous game about to unfold claim more than just her hope? Marcela stood frozen, her heart racing. The cruel man's laughter echoed in her mind, mixing with Layla's desperate sobs. Edward was trapped in a moment of paralyzed fear, giving Marcela room to take charge of her own fate. But that was before chaos broke like a wave crashing against the jagged rocks of her reality. "Enough!" Marcela yelled, her voice cutting through the tension. She turned on the stranger, eyes blazing. "This is about my family." A sudden commotion erupted at the back of the hall. The crowd gasped, eyes fixating on a figure lunging forward. It was a security guard, his face flush and urgent. "We have an emergency. Everyone needs to leave now." Whispers of confusion rippled through the guests. The guard was breathing heavily, his posture tense. "It's not safe here." Before anyone could react, the doors burst open and a group of scruffy men stormed in. They were dirty, rough-looking, adrenaline-fueled, and their eyes held the kind of desperation that suggested they had nothing left to lose. A collective gasp filled the space. Cries of panic erupted, mingling with the sound of heels clattering against the floor as guests scrambled for exits. "Layla!" Marcela shouted, her sister still caught in the whirlwind of emotion. Her little sister, the one she promised to protect, was caught in this nightmare. The leader of the intruders stepped forward, pointing straight at Marcela. "There you are. We know what you're doing, trying to play the rich lady, acting like you don't belong with your own people." His voice was rough, vibrating with rage and something darker. "No, you don't understand. I'm not," Marcela stammered. But the man cut her off, eyes filled with wild intensity. The memories of their childhood burst forward in her mind, the laughter, the shared dreams. But as fast as that dream had come, it shattered. "You turned your back on us, on our family." He stepped closer, the crowd pressing away like waves from a storm. Marcela's stomach twisted. "I never wanted to forget. I was trying to make a better life for us." She gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white, the music of her heart pounding in her ears. "Your better life comes with a price," he shouted, his voice echoing against the grand architecture. The room shook with tension. "We lost too much because of you." A low murmur spread. Through the crowd, eyes darted between Marcela and the intruders, confusion morphing into fear. Edward's face darkened, revealing the context of a truth he had kept hidden, a truth that threatened to upend everything. In a swirling blur of movement, the leader violently surged forward, grabbing Marcela, his grip hard, threatening. "You're coming with us," he growled. "No!" Layla screamed, lunging forward, but Marcela raised a hand to stop her. All eyes were on them, on the sisterly bond poised on the edge of destruction. But then, just as Marcela braced herself for the struggle, Edward shocked them all. He stepped forward, voice firm and commanding amidst the chaos. "Let her go," he shouted, his eyes strangely filled with a mix of authority and desperation. The hall fell silent as heads turned, surprise rippling through the guests. Edward's expression was a stark contrast to his earlier cowardice. "This isn't how you resolve things," he stated, the weight of hidden truths curling around his words like smoke. Leela, wide-eyed, looked between her sister and Edward. "But you!" A shocked breath escaped Marcela. What was he doing? The sudden switch rattled her, sending her heart pounding anew. In that moment, she felt the ground beneath her shift. Every relationship she'd thought she understood teetered on the brink of revolution. "Enough," the leader growled, his grip tightening on Marcela's arm. "No more games. You think you're safe?" He stepped closer to Edward, eyes glinting with menace. "You don't know what you're dealing with, rich man." And then, from somewhere deep in the shadows, a voice broke through, startling everyone. "Actually, they do." The figure stepped into the light, and Marcela's breath caught. It was someone she never expected to see again. Someone whose very presence could change everything she thought she knew. Secrets, wrapped in shadows, converged, knitting a web around them all. What would it reveal? What more was hidden beneath the surface? The night was a dangerous game, and everything was about to change. The figure stepped into the light, and Marcela's breath caught. A blur of familiarity painted the room. It was Penelope, Marcela's estranged mentor. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the moment Penelope left for a life of luxury, abandoning the mission that once united them. The room buzzed with new confusion, eyes darting between her and the intruders. "Penny?" Marcela's voice trembled, hope threading through despair. Penelope held up a hand, her expression serious. "I can explain, Marcela, but right now we don't have time." The leader's grip on Marcela tightened, his face twisted with anger. "You know her?" he spat, eyes flashing with venom. "You can't just walk in here like you own the place. You turned your back, too. And you think breaking down doors makes you right?" Penelope challenged. The temperature in the room dropped, tensions crackling like static. "We need to get out before it's too late." Before anyone could process her words, a loud bang reverberated through the hall. A gunshot? The shock sent waves of panic through the audience. Guests screamed, spilling their champagne as they fled toward the exits. Edward's face blanched, a mask of terror. "Security! We need security!" he yelled. But his voice was drowned out by the scuffled chaos. Marcela felt the weight of her sister at her side. Layla's eyes were wide, reflecting pure fear. "Marcela, what's happening?" "I don't know," Marcela replied, heart racing. But beneath her fear was a growing resolve. Years of fighting and surviving surged within her. "Come on." Penelope grabbed Marcela's arm, yanking her away from the enraged leader. "Trust me." But just as they turned to escape, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. A wave of terror swept through the crowd. Murmurs turned into shouts, and the stench of panic filled the air. Marcela could barely see a thing. "Over here!" Penelope's voice cut through the confusion, pulling Marcela and Layla with her toward a nearby door. But as they moved, a figure lunged out of the shadows, tackling Penelope to the ground. "No!" Marcela screamed, her heart pounding in her chest as she surged forward instinctively. But another silhouette blocked her way. Hands outstretched, panic sparking in their eyes. "Get back! Don't get involved!" the man shouted, but there was something strange about his urgency. Before Marcela could register it, the shadows surged, and chaos erupted as people started shouting, pushing past one another, trying to find escape. Fumbling through the dark, Marcela reached for Leela's hand. But as she turned back, her heart sank. Penelope was gone. The struggle had pulled her into the crowd, and now Marcela couldn't see her at all. "Marcela," Leela cried, desperation clipping her voice. "We can't stay here." Just then, another gunshot rang out, and everything froze. The crowd silenced. Marcela's skin prickled. That wasn't just fear. It was a shift in the air, a weight that pressed down hard. From somewhere deeper within the gathering darkness, Penelope's voice rang out again, but it was different this time. Calm, almost too calm. "I wouldn't move if I were you," she warned, but there was no trace of urgency in her tone. The leader, still clutching Marcela, looked at Penelope with confused rage. "What are you talking about?" And just like that, the power dynamics shifted. The tension in Penelope's voice laid bare all the hidden lessons and unspoken truths she had carried. With a sharp turn of her body, she revealed the truth Marcela had never seen coming. The intruder was part of an organized plan. The cold realization hit Marcela like a wave. Her mind raced. What had Penelope truly entwined herself in? "Marcela, listen to me." Penelope's voice broke through the chaos, and every eye shifted toward her, fixated on the unfolding drama. "Everything you thought you knew, it's about to change. You have to trust me now more than ever." The crowd remained silent, collective breaths held tight. With each heartbeat, uncertainty grew. Could she trust the woman who had woven herself into her past? Marcela's answer echoed through the heavy air, rife with impatience and suffering. But the truth wasn't what it seemed, nor was it going to be easy. Who was friend? Who was foe? Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a deafening roar erupted somewhere outside, as if the city itself had grown tired of the pretending. Eyes widened, whispers broke into frantic chatter, and Marcela felt herself teetering on the brink, heart racing and pulse thundering. Tomorrow would dawn differently than any dawn before. But today would define everything. What was about to happen next? The crowd shifted restlessly, eyes darting between Penelope and the intruders. Marcela felt her heart race as she clutched Layla's hand, unsure of what would happen next. The chaos was palpable, every silence stretching into a sharp tension. "Whatever it is, we're not your enemies," Penelope yelled, taking a step forward, desperation lacing her voice. But her eyes spoke volumes. "This isn't about you, it's about something bigger," the intruder snarled, his grip tightening on Marcela's arm. "You turned your back on the family. You think you can just waltz back in like nothing matters?" "Stop," Penelope shouted, urgency flooding her words. "You don't understand what you're about to unleash." Marcela's heart thudded wildly. What did Penelope know that they didn't? But before she could voice her question, a deafening crash pierced through the air, the sound of shattering glass echoing off the walls. The lights flickered again, then went dark once more. Panic erupted. Grown men shouted, women screamed, echoing cries filling the panic-stricken hall. Marcela stumbled, feeling Layla jerking at her side. "We have to get out!" But just as they moved to escape, the front doors burst open forcefully, brighter light flooding into the darkness. Two figures suddenly appeared, one on crutches, another holding a thick baton raised high. The crowd gasped. Nobody had seen them approach. "Get back!" the figure on crutches shouted, voice rasping with authority. It was a man Marcela recognized. Carlos, a face from her past that held a mix of fuzzy memories and deep shame. "Carlos?" she breathed, shock coursing through her. "What are you?" "Enough of this," he yelled, eyes sweeping over the chaos. "This ends now. You shouldn't be here." Before she could process his appearance, he locked eyes with Penelope. "You led them here, didn't you? You're the reason everything is falling apart." Penelope's jaw tightened, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand." He swung it toward the newbie intruder, knocking him to the ground. Everyone gasped, the chaotic scene spiraling further into mayhem. Eduardo, the man who had once looked so invincible, stumbled backward as Carlos advanced. But it wasn't over. Just when it seemed the tide might turn in their favor, a deafening explosion rocked the hall. The roof above began to shake, debris scattering down like fallen leaves. Light bulbs burst, sending sparks flying, and the urgency in the air ignited. "Run!" Carlos shouted, but the urgency transformed into chaos. Guests screamed, some falling, the air filled with dust and uncertainty. The grand hall, once a symbol of wealth and prestige, became a twisted labyrinth of fear. In the chaos, a shadowy figure darted behind Carlos, catching him off guard. A knife glinted in the brief light, a betrayal shrouded in darkness. It struck deep. "No!" Marcela screamed, as her past collided with the present. "Carlos!" Time froze. The figure vanished into the throng, leaving nothing but confusion in their wake. The crowd erupted into panic again, running in every direction. "Layla!" Marcela cried, her sister's face pale with shock. "I'm here!" Layla yelled, holding on to Marcela as they stumbled toward the exit. But the scene blurred in a haze of fear. And then Penelope's voice broke through, sharper than glass. "It's not over. You think you know the stakes here? Trust is a fragile thing. Secrets reshape worlds, and not all of them. Them have good endings." The magnitude of her words washed over Marcela. Everything she thought she understood, the relationships, the histories, they threatened to spiral into an abyss of unknown danger. As they stepped into the light, the chaos of the night swirling around them, Marcela was left with one haunting question. What was Penelope hiding? And what other truths lived in the shadows, waiting to tear everything they fought for apart? The crowd surged toward the exit, panic wrapping around them like an unexpected shroud. Marcela held on to Layla tightly, her heart racing as they pressed through the chaos. The bright light from outside, their only beacon in the swirl of confusion and fear. But even in the midst of the turmoil, Penelope's words echoed in Marcela's ears. "Trust is a fragile thing." Suddenly, everything shifted again. Just as they reached the door, a loud crash resonated within the hall, causing the ground to shake underfoot. The walls reverberated, and a bright flash erupted above them, illuminating the chaos for a brief moment, revealing terror-stricken faces, frozen mid-scream. In that moment, Marcela saw something she never expected. A figure leaped through the chaos. It was Edward, his expression twisted with fright as he stumbled into view, blood on his shirt and desperation in his eyes. "Edward!" Marcela gasped. "What happened?" He stammered. But before he could finish, another explosion rocked the building, sending tremors through the crowd. Cries intensified, people pushing and shoving in. A frantic scramble for safety. "Get down!" Carlos shouted, raising his baton again. but his voice was swallowed by the cacophony. In that instant, fear transformed into something raw and real. The panic heightened with every beat of Marcela's heart, every breath sharp and shallow. Could they survive this? Then, amidst the chaos, there came a deafening roar. It was not the anguished cries of the partygoers, but the sound of a helicopter, blades slicing through the air. Marcela's gaze shot upward, following the noise that drowned the hall's tumult. Spotlights cut through the darkness and landed on the crowd like piercing eyes, seeking something amongst the madness. "Get down," Edward repeated, his voice strained. Yet instead of fear, a wild bolt of recognition sparked in Marcela's mind. "Wait," she shouted. She turned, her eyes scanning the faces around her until they landed on the leader of the intruders, whose anger faded into confusion. "What do they want?" "You've got me," he shouted back, hands raised defensively. "Whoever they are, they're not here for me." Before she could react, a sharp turn in the chaos happened. The crowd, once frenzied, seemed to freeze as a figure descended from the helicopter. It wasn't a military officer, nor a security team. It was a woman, clad in a tailored black suit, her expression calm and commanding as she touched the ground, flanked by guards. "Zara," Marcela whispered, shocked recognition flooding her. Zara, her former business partner, whose departure had been shrouded in mystery. The betrayal, the shadows, it all surged back like a wave crashing against the remnants of her grounded life. "What are you doing here?" Marcela shouted over the noise, searching Zara's gaze for answers. But the woman's eyes held an icy clarity that chilled Marcela to her core. "Resolving issues," Zara replied coolly, her voice cutting clear through the chaos. "You've played your hand, Marcela. Time to lay it down." The crowd gasped as the truth bled through, a shocking realization spreading like wildfire. Marcela's heart sank. Everything that was happening, the chaos, the betrayal, it all revolved around Zara, an unseen puppet master pulling the strings in the night's dark drama. "Was this all a game to you?" Marcela felt rage wash over her as she moved closer. "My family, my life, was it just a pawn in your twisted plan?" Before Zara could respond, the leader lunged at her, his earlier bravado stripped away. "You knew? You knew what was coming and didn't warn us?" "No," Marcela shouted, heart thrumming wildly. "You don't get to turn this around. This is about families torn apart, not some game of power." But Zara's sharp smile twisted the tension in the air. "You underestimate the lengths people will go to for control, dear. You've all been pieces on the board, and it's about time you realize the stakes." Marcela felt her blood run cold. With everything spiraling out of control, the realization hit hard. The stakes were far higher than she could have imagined, and her fight for justice had just turned into a larger battleground. Zara was not just a shadow of her past. She was the storm that threatened to consume everything in its path. Could they find their way out from underneath this collapsing tower of lies? Would trust ever return, or had it shattered like glass on the marble floor? Marcela's breath quickened as she stood at the precipice of chaos, knowing everything had changed irrevocably. Yet the real battle had just begun. More questions swirled in her mind, each one burning more fiercely than the last. What would they all choose when faced with the ultimate betrayal? As the lights flickered out and darkness descended, Marcela was left with one anguishing thought. What now? The chaos swirled around Marcela, a storm of screams and confusion that clawed at her resolve. The noise pressed down like a weight, the cacophony consuming everything. She could feel the heat of panic rising, each heartbeat drowning out rational thought. Suddenly, Zara, poised with that chilling calm, stepped closer, taking center stage in this nightmarish unfolding. "You're making a mistake, Marcela," Zara said, her tone smooth, as if she were discussing the weather rather than this unfolding horror. "You don't understand how deeply this runs. There's more at stake here than you realize." Marcela's mind raced. "What are you talking about?" She felt Layla's hand tremble beside her, every inch of her wanting to shield her sister from the madness. "This isn't the time for games." But Zara's eyes gleamed with something darker. She leaned in, her voice low and deliberate. "This whole night, it's not about power. It's about survival. The families torn apart, they're just collateral. You, Layla, Edward, they're all part of this." Before Marcela could react, another burst of noise erupted over their heads. A flash of light flickered from the helicopter, blinding for a moment. It illuminated the faces around them, revealing terror and confusion. And then, unexpectedly, the figure of a man stepped from the shadows. "Enough," he bellowed, powerful and menacing. It was a figure, familiar to Marcela, but one she wished to forget. Her father. "Dad?" Her voice cracked as she struggled to comprehend. He had disappeared from their lives long ago, a ghost now made flesh. The room fell silent, disbelief hanging like smoke in the air. "Get away from them!" he shouted, anger radiating from him as he stepped protectively in front of Marcela and Layla. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Marcela's heart thudded painfully in her chest. "How can you even be here?" But deep down, she couldn't shake the guilt of familiarity, because though he had abandoned them, the bond was never entirely severed. "Family means something different to me now," her father shot back, his voice trembling with emotion. The world around them seemed to fade as every pair of eyes fixed on this unexpected reunion. Zara laughed darkly. "Family? You really think you can protect them?" She made a sweeping gesture toward the chaos still raging outside. "Look around, you fool. You know how fragile our world is now." The leader of the intruders lunged forward. "You think you can take her? You think you can save her?" But the fight was lost in the surge of emotions. As Marcela stepped closer to her father, it felt like a lifeline amidst the drowning chaos. Then her father surprised them all. "The truth is, I'm not here just for them." His voice was steady, but thick with underlying secrets. "I'm here to keep you safe. To end this once and for all before it consumes us all." The tension hung heavy, shadows left dancing in the flickering lights, as Marcela's world flicked on an axis. Trust was shattered. The very foundation of her life quaked beneath her feet. Zara's mockery faded, replaced with the realization that there were larger forces at play. Suddenly, without warning, a second explosion erupted. A deafening blast that sent everyone crashing to the ground. The entire hall trembled, and amidst the dust and confusion, Marcela felt herself pulled under. As the debris settled, the air was thick with smoke. Eyes blinked away fear, but when Marcela looked up, her heart seized. Her father was gone, disappeared into the chaos, the shadows swallowing him whole. "Where is he?" Layla screamed, panic taking on new life. And then in that moment, The mask slipped. Zara turned, her expression shifting from casual confidence to sheer fear. "We have to go now," she ordered, urgency lacing her every word. Something shifted in Marcela's heart, a seed of doubt planting itself. All these years of believing that family was the constant truth, it felt crumbled into dust. Could she trust her father? Had she ever really known him? The shadows beckoned around them, but the most troubling thought lingered. What had her father known all along? As they clambered to their feet, a horrifying new reality set in. Everything they'd fought for was spiraling into a dangerous unknown. The night was dark and full of secrets, and as they bolted toward the exit, through the chaos, a chilling unease settled around them. What other layers of truth hid within the darkness? Marcela knew with certainty. The morning light would never reveal the depths of their devastation. What now? What awaited them just beyond the door? The chaos had only just begun to settle when a rumble from outside seemed to shake the air around them again. Marcela held on to Layla, fear coursing through their veins. Zara's cold gaze lingered on the helicopter, but something about her expression shifted, confusion crossing her features. "Stay close," Zara commanded, rushing towards the exit as the dust from the explosions settled like fog. But as they moved, an ominous vibration crept through the ground. Something was coming. That's when it happened. From the side of the room, a panel in the wall burst open, sending splinters flying. Marcela barely had time to process what she was seeing before a group of figures emerged, dressed in dark gear, faces obscured by masks. The crowd shifted, eyes wide in horror, breaths caught in throats. "Anyone who doesn't want to die needs to stay calm," boomed a voice through a megaphone. The poised facade of the party shattered into pure panic. The masked intruders swept into view with weapons drawn, commanding attention like puppets manipulating their strings. "What is going on?" Marcela shouted, heart pounding. "We're not after you," one of the intruders yelled back, but it was too late. The crowd screamed and scattered, a tidal wave of confusion racing toward the exits. Marcela turned, pulling Layla closer as they squeezed between the throng. Zara had vanished in the melee, the lurking shadows of the past swallowing her whole. Just when Marcela thought the chaos couldn't increase, a sharp scream pierced the air, a voice she recognized. "Layla, no!" Turning around, Marcela's heart dropped. It was Penelope, her mentor, her guiding light, struggling against one of the masked figures. Marcela's instincts roared to life, tearing through the cloud of panic. "Let her go!" But right then, another figure stepped out from the shadows. It was her father, not dead, but in the flesh, scrambling toward Penelope with fury in his eyes. "Get away from her!" he thundered, lunging forward, but getting caught off guard by another masked intruder. "Dad, no!" Marcela screamed, her voice laced with horror. Everything turned into chaos. The masked figures were everywhere, and the air was thick with fear. They were attacking anyone who dared defy them. A visceral knot of dread tightened in Marcela's stomach as she realized how dark this night had truly become. "Look out!" Layla cried as another masked figure swung their weapon toward a guest nearby. The sound of a shot rang out, echoing like a gunshot through the hall. It hit someone in the crowd, and screams erupted again, cutting through Marcela like a knife. Fear gripped her throat, her world tightening. But then she saw it, the figure of an armed man pushing through the crowd, aiming for her father. And just before the fatal shot rang out, time slowed. Penelope took a step forward, pushing Marcela behind her, a fierce look on her face. "I'm the one you want," she shouted, suddenly feeding the chaos with a sacrificial recklessness, unlike anything Marcela had seen before. And then it hit. The gun fired at Penelope, but before anyone could process it, her father lunged at her back, taking the blow. The world stopped. "No!" The cry escaped Marcela like lightning, a scream of disbelief. Her father crumpled, falling to the floor like a marionette with its strings cut. Silence swallowed the chaos, sweeping through the hall like a frigid wave. Every eye suddenly turned to Marcela, whispers of horror ricocheting around the room. She dropped to her knees, the reality crashing in. Her father was on the floor, bleeding out as Penelope tried desperately to staunch the flow. "Call for help," Penelope shouted, panic in her eyes. But Marcela couldn't move. "What have you done?" she whispered, gutted by anguish, fear clawing at her insides. The heroes of her past had crumbled before her, and all that remained was a painful truth. The masked figures began to pull back, their mission complete. They had aimed for a head, the boss of the family, leading to a brittle silence. "This is just the beginning," one of the masked figures threatened, tossing a card onto the ground beside her father. "The game has changed. You all have until sunrise." And with that, they slipped back into the shadows, leaving chaos in their wake. Marcela's breath became shallow as she stared, the card barely hanging in view. What game, she thought, filled with dread, determination igniting within her. Everything she had thought she knew was unraveling, and now the stakes were personal. Would she reclaim it all, or was it too late? Time was running out. They had to find out what the truth was before it shattered them all. Marcela knelt there, still in shock, unable to fully grasp the horror before her. Her father's body lay crumpled, blood pooling on the glossy marble floor under the dim lights. Penelope desperately tried to stem the flow, her hands trembling. "Someone call an ambulance," Marcela shouted, her voice breaking through the turmoil. The air felt thick with panic. The chaos around them turned muted, like a distant storm. She noticed the faces of the guests, frozen in shock, every eye glued to the unfolding tragedy. Then, a flash, a movement at the corner of her eye. The masked intruders were retreating, but there was something off about their exit. One of them paused, turning back just as Marcela felt her heart leap into her throat. The room's tension heightened. "What now?" she whispered as a chill skittered up her spine. The figure took a few steps backward, then raised something in the air. A small device, shiny and black. A bomb? Fear clutched at her throat. Panic cascaded through the crowd. "Nobody move!" the man shouted, voice venomous, cutting through the silence. "We're not done yet." The sound of voices rose in dissonant panic. Some guests ducked behind tables. Others stared, paralyzed by fear. "It's a trap!" someone yelled. "Why are you doing this?" Marcela cried, her voice shaking. But the man only laughed, low and chilling. "This ends now," he stated, eyes glinting with malice. It was never about the money. With that, he pressed a button on the device, and the hall erupted in an explosion of lights, green and red, Swirling like some nightmarish carnival, a woman stepped into the spotlight, pushing through the chaos with an unyielding stride, commanding attention like a queen. It was Zara again, composed and fierce. "Stop this madness," she ordered, voice smooth yet laced with authority. "Zara!" Marcela's voice trembled. "What are you doing? You were supposed to help." But Zara just shook her head, a slight, enigmatic smile on her lips. "Oh, Marcela, you need to understand something." She glanced at the intruder wielding the device. "You think you're fighting for your family? In a way, you're all just pawns in a very elaborate game." Marcela's mind reeled. Pieces were beginning to click, but the full picture eluded her. "You set this up?" she gasped. "All of this? The attack? This isn't just about my father. This is about us." Zara's eyes flicked with something, an emotion that made Marcela's stomach drop. "There are things you've never been told, secrets that could tear you apart. Families are fragile, and trust even more so." Then the unthinkable happened. The device in the intruder's hand beeped loudly, and the laughter faded, abruptly replaced with a metallic voice that came through a speaker embedded somehow. "Initiating Phase 2. Project Reflection is a go. The hourglass has started." A low rumble enveloped the room. Marcela felt the walls quake, and the sky outside flickered ominously. "What are you doing?" she screamed. Zara stood tall, her features carefully controlled. "This was always the plan. You either follow through or lose everything." Marcela felt her breath quicken, cold dread climbing up her spine. She glanced toward Penelope, who was still trying to stop the bleeding. If the bomb went off— "Stop!" she yelled. "It can't end like this. There has to be another way." But then the unthinkable dawned. The room began to shift. A cascade of memories flooded her mind. The arguments, the secrets buried deep over years. What had Zara built in the shadows? Then a crack of thunder boomed outside, shaking the foundation of everything Marcela knew. And in that moment, a shocking truth dawned upon her. Zara was not the power. Ali, she thought. Maybe she never was. The gravity of betrayal slammed into her, twisting deep in her gut. Everything she believed about loyalty and family distorted under the weight of that realization. "What did you do?" she breathed, paralyzed with revelation. The ground trembled more violently now, and as Zara stepped back, her smile unfurled, smug and utterly composed. "You'll understand soon enough," she said, voice silky with satisfaction, before turning to the intruder. Suddenly, it felt like everything shifted. The very floor beneath them quaked, revealing cracks that snaked through the tiles. The night had turned into a spiraling abyss, and Marcela knew she was standing at the edge of something monumental. The walls closed in, relationships shattered, and alliances crumbling, and Marcela stood trapped in the middle, wrestling with the visceral agony of betrayal. She had to make a choice, one that could change everything. What would happen next? As the clock began to tick down, the tremors in the ground grew more forceful, the chaos sweeping through the hall like a frantic tide. Marcela knelt beside her father, panic twisting her insides like a vice. "Please, stay with me," she cried, grasping his hand, warm but growing cold. His eyes, usually so fierce, now looked hazy. "Marcela," he whispered, pain clear in his voice, You need to understand the truth. Don't talk, Penelope urged, her hands still pressed on the wound. Help is coming. But Marcela could see, in her eyes, that hope was dimming. Zara stepped forward, a cold smirk on her face as the tension pulsed in the air. This is beyond you, Marcela. You don't have the power to change this, she taunted, as if the chaos was simply a show, a puppet theater where lives meant nothing. No, Marcela breathed, her heart racing. Every moment stretched painfully, her father's breath growing shallower. Marcela squared her shoulders, the fire of determination igniting within. This ends now. With a surge of adrenaline, she rose, eyes locking onto Zara's. You think you can manipulate everything, but families mean something to me. They always have. The lights flickered, illuminating the tension-filled contortions on everyone's faces. The intruder with the device sneered, fingers itching to press a button, but something in Marcela's voice stopped him. Don't be a pawn in a game you don't understand, she shouted, frustration breaking the chaos. You want control? You want power? But at what cost? You think fear will win? It ends tonight. As the chaos danced around them, the crowd began to rally. Courage sparked in their eyes, and murmurs of unity began to rise. They were moving as a collective, a wave of humanity against the shadows lurking in the room. Help me, Marcela cried, calling to the crowd. A brave soul stepped forward, then another. People began to surround them, creating a barrier between her family and the impending threats. Together, someone shouted, hands linked, voices strong. With their combined will and solidarity, the masked intruders hesitated. The light from the helicopter overhead pierced the darkness, igniting the hope that Marcela thought had dimmed. Now, Penelope shouted, taking charge, and with a brave motion, she took Marcela by the arm. We don't have time. The bond between them grew. They moved toward the exit, bodies huddled close, determination blazing against the despair. In a rush, they surged out of the hall, the brightness outside illuminating their path, the sharp tinges of freedom laced with the fresh night air. In that moment, everything felt different. The shadows couldn't follow them here. The laughter of reclaimed life echoed as they escaped into the open streets, clear of the nightmares they had just fled. But as Marcela turned, seeking her father in the dust of their escape, he remained, cornered in the shrouded aftermath that clung to the building like a curse. Desperation pulling at her heartstrings. What now? Penelope's voice was grounded, eyes scanning the chaos. As they stood on the precipice of a new future, Marcela realized family is forged in trust and fight, in unity against the dark, but knew there were still questions burning like embers. How to piece the past together? Would fears ever truly fade? As the morning light crept over the horizon, it illuminated more than just the pavement before them. It called for renewal. It declared a chance to reclaim lost love. Together, they could navigate the tangled web that lay ahead, fighting the shadows together, drawing lighter breaths. Remember, Marcela whispered, her heart beating in rhythm. This isn't over. It's just the beginning. Join me, friends, in this journey. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming exclusive stories that will take us even deeper. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm And let's keep this adventure alive. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about where we go from here. Instantly share this with at least 5 friends who need to see this finale. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.